You are watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and normally I'm not a big fan of top 10 lists, because I feel they're kind of an oversaturated and kind of played out genre of videos. However, from time to time, I do occasionally enjoy watching them, and I have done one previously on my channel in the past, so I figured I'd do one more here. I might do a few from time to time. Don't expect this to be a regular thing, simply because top 10 videos are not my forte, but I felt that I wanted to talk about this subject, so I'll try and be as detailed as possible. As you can tell by the title and picture here, today I will be talking about my top 10 Dragon Ball movies. Now the thing is this will be just my opinion, please keep that in mind. With that being said, I do have my own criteria of what can qualify for this list. Now, this might be kind of controversial, but I'm going to include the two movie specials as eligible to be movies, the Trunks special and the Bardock special. For the main reason being, I always thought they were movies when I first heard about them, only later discovering they were TV specials. And number two, they're still called movies on the US release. However, things that will not qualify are the OVAs, such as Episode of Bardock, which isn't even really that good, the Hachiyak specials, even though I love them. You know, Plan to Eradicate the Saiyans and Plan to Eradicate the Super Saiyans. Although I've never seen the original version, I've heard it's better. But the OVAs will not count for the simple purpose that they're normal episode length and haven't been dubbed anyway. Not that them not being dubbed into English is a deciding factor, but I felt it was worth mentioning. I also won't be including things like Goku's Fire Brigade or Goku's Traffic Safety, which are PSAs anyway, plus they're terrible. So with that being said, let's get on with the list. Number 10, The World's Strongest. This was a very hard pick, and just know that the honorable mentions I mention later could definitely have been number 10, however, this is what I decided to go with. The World's Strongest was the second Dragon Ball Z movie, and I guess technically since Path to Power came much later, that would make it the fifth overall movie in the Dragon Ball series. The World's Strongest was about an evil scientist named Dr. Wheelo. Dr. Wheeler's main goal is to become the strongest person in the world, to modify the human race using his science, and that way he could, he just modifies people is basically what he does. And he has a little army of bio-soldiers that he makes. Not the kind of bio-soldiers that were in Bio Broly. Different evil scientist, different bio-soldiers. Part of the main reason I really love this movie, as compared to the other Dragon Ball Z movies, is this one feels more like Dragon Ball than Dragon Ball Z. And overall, I prefer the tone of the original series, even though my favorite arc is actually the Cell arc altogether, but we'll go over that in another video, perhaps in the future. Many of the side characters are prominent in this, such as Oolong, Master Roshi, Bulma, and stuff like that. And although there is fighting involved, it's not the primary focus of the movie, Dr. Wheelo himself being a brain in a jar. This movie is only number 10 on the list because I do feel all those that are going to follow are much better and more solid movies, but this one is still a fun movie to watch. And if you're a fan of original Dragon Ball and you somewhat don't dislike the pacing in Z, then you might like this. I don't know very many people who would say that, but I'm sure they exist. For instance, Snowman. He does not particularly care for Z, but that's a different story again. But anyway, that's why number 10 is World's Strongest. It's fun. It's not too action-based, and it has a lot more adventure feel to it, even though there is a lot of action, and it is still technically part of Z rather than original Dragon Ball. That's really all I have to say about World's Strongest. I recommend you check it out. It's included in, I believe, the first Dragon Ball Z movie pack. There's quite a few of them out there, I think 4 altogether. Anyway, let's get on to the next one. Number 9. Cooler's Revenge. Cooler's Revenge introduces us to Frieza's brother, Cooler, and it has a lot of cool fight scenes in it. Not to mention it, I like how it expands on Frieza's family tree and gives us some insight into more characters that are his same race. I was actually debating whether to choose this or The Revenge of Cooler for this list, but I do think that, The Return of Cooler rather, but I think the first Cooler film, Cooler's Revenge, is just better in pacing and execution and plot. So if you like the Frieza saga, I definitely think you'll enjoy this, because it's Frieza's brother, who is very similar to Frieza, coming back to get revenge, although that's kind of a misnomer. And the reason I say that is, even though it's called Cooler's Revenge, he doesn't care about Frieza. He's just coming back because he wants to kill Goku just for the sake of killing him. I mean, Goku's not even the one who kills Frieza. But I digress. The movie itself has a pretty decent plot that's well held together and has good pacing. The fights are cool, and the transformations are very cool. For instance, I think Cooler's fifth form is a lot more badass than, Golden Frieza. I'd rather have like a Triceratops looking thing than a golden reskin color. Anyway, the reason this isn't higher on the list is even though I love the fight scenes and it has a decent plot, it's not as memorable as the next few items, obviously, otherwise it would have been higher. But anyway, on to the next one. Number 8, Battle of Gods. Although I'm one of the few people to consider Dragon Ball GT the true ending to Dragon Ball, I was happy to see the series was coming back anyway. Battle of Gods was the first major Dragon Ball film in many, many years. I believe it was like 18 years when it came out, not including Yo Son Goku and his friend's return, which hasn't been dubbed, I might add, and, that's something that would be great to have over here. But anyway, Battle of Gods, I didn't see it in theaters because I wasn't caught up on the series yet. I actually got into Dragon Ball much later in life than most people. To be fair, I watched I watched some of it as a kid here and there. Like, I watched some random bits. I think I watched pretty much the entire King Piccolo saga, and then I watched some random bits from the Saiyan and Frieza sagas whenever they were on Toonami. But as an adult, I got really into the series and watched through all of Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, and Dragon Ball GT, as well as all the movies. But anyway, this is not what that's about. This is about Battle of Gods. Battle of Gods is a great movie because, again, it doesn't focus on everything to fight with. Now, there's going to be some spoilers here in this next part, so just be warned. But I also like that the ending was kind of a subversion. For instance, Goku doesn't actually beat Beerus. In fact, he loses. Beerus decides because he did well and gave him what he wanted, that he wasn't going to destroy the Earth. That's the thing about Battle of Gods, is I love the character of Beerus. He was a good introduction. Although I don't think Super Saiyan God was that epic of a transformation, it's just a skinny Kaioken. Not to mention Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan, which was later retconned to Super Saiyan Blue, is just Super Saiyan 1 but with blue hair. But Battle of Gods got a very limited US theatrical release, and then Resurrection F got a slightly longer one, but Battle of Gods is a much better movie than Resurrection F. And I definitely recommend you check out Battle of Gods if you want to see a really good modern Dragon Ball movie. It's only a shame they're rehashing it, or they've rehashed it in Dragon Ball Super for the first arc, and then rehashed Resurrection F for the second, before getting to the other arcs, which look a lot better. Anyway, let's move on. Number 7, Wrath of the Dragon. Wrath of the Dragon is about an ancient warrior named Tapion who is trying to prevent the release of an ancient monster called Hirudegarn. And Hirudegarn ends up basically possessing him, and, he turns into Hirudegarn at times, if I remember correctly. Or at least the legs of a Hirudegarn. I really like this one, because I really like the whole ancient lore aspect of it that a lot of other Dragon Ball movies don't have. It also gives Kid Trunks a lot of starlight, which he doesn't get a lot of, to be fair. Future Trunks kind of steals the spotlight a lot more than Kid Trunks. Also, Hirudegarn's pretty cool. This movie is action-packed and entertaining throughout. It does not disappoint, and if you're a Dragon Ball fan, particularly a Dragon Ball Z fan, you'll most likely enjoy it. And the concept of it alone merits it enough to be on this list. It may not be in the top 5, but it is in the top 7, and in Dragon Ball, 7 is the most important number. Let's move on. Number 6, Fusion Reborn. Fusion Reborn is an epic Dragon Ball Z movie that has a bunch of evil people escaping hell because of Janemba, which is a demon sort of thing, that was created from a janitor in Otherworld fucking up. Fusion Reborn has a great story, great fight scenes, great action, great design, everything is great about it. I mean, there's even a joke of Hitler escaping hell and meeting Super Saiyans, and being all astonished. Plus, the Hell area is just such a good map concept. I love how it's implemented into Xenoverse 2 as well. Not to mention, Janemba is a great character. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have a lot of depth, but his just design is so good, and the concept is really cool too. And when I say the design is good, I'm referring to Super Janemba, of course, the more demon-looking one, rather than the fat Buddha thing. This movie focuses on Otherworld a lot more than the rest of the movies do, and that's something I really like. The Dragon Ball Afterlife is fascinating. But of course, the best part of all of this is what this movie introduced us to. This movie introduced us to the character of Gogeta. We had Vegito and Gotenks before, but this was the first appearance of Gogeta, and I think that that's great, to see the other form of fusion created. Granted, I don't like how Gogeta and Gotenks have the same clothes, whereas Vegito gets his own outfit. I don't see why those two had to be the same, but regardless. Anyway, that's why I love Fusion Reborn, among other reasons. It's a great movie, and I definitely recommend you check it out. On to the next one. Number 5, Broly Second Coming. It may be a little controversial that Broly is in my top 5, and it's going to be even more controversial when you find out he is twice. However, as I mentioned, this is all strictly my opinion, and I'm going to voice it, so here we go. Broly Second Coming is the second Broly movie where he is revived and fights against Gohan, Goten, and Trunks, because this takes place during the Buu Saga, where Goku is at the Otherworld tournament, which isn't part of the manga, but obviously the movies aren't part of the manga either. Look, I know what you're thinking. Broly, you think, is an overrated character, and while I would have agreed with that a couple years ago, I don't anymore for one major reason. Everyone seems to hate him now. You get all these people bitching about Broly and saying how bad he is. Granted, you get people who hype him up a lot and give him more credit than he's due, but I also think he is more powerful than some people give him credit for. Not to mention, it's not just Broly that makes this movie entertaining, it's just a good Dragon Ball Z movie. It has all the fight scenes and everything you'd expect it to, as does the other one. Broly is a good character, and although he doesn't have a lot of depth, neither does Janemba, but nobody seems to hate Janemba. Regardless, that's part of the reason why Broly's Second Coming is my number 5. I enjoy it, and it's entertaining. That's pretty much all there is to it. I think it's better than the others just because I prefer it. On to the next one, which, big shocker, you'll see what it is in a second. Number 4, Broly the Legendary Super Saiyan. As I mentioned, Broly is in the top 5 twice, one right after the other. This movie introduced us to Broly and gives us some more Saiyans, and I love Saiyans, even though they became too much of a central focus, I feel, later on. By which I mean all other characters and races were kind of pushed to be powerless, up until we got Beerus in Battle of Gods. I still love Saiyans, and I don't really think any other kind of character is worth as much as a Saiyan. Which is why in Xenoverse and Xenoverse 2, my custom characters are of course always Saiyan. Granted, I have a human character on Xenoverse 1, and I plan on making some other characters in Xenoverse 2 later on, but my primary character is always a Saiyan. I also like this movie for all the other reasons I like the other Broly movie. I enjoy the character, and I enjoy the concept. The fight scenes are really cool, and I really like to see just where the story goes and how it went. So it was a very good movie, and a lot of people may not like it because a lot of people dislike Broly. However, I'd say if you haven't seen it just for that reason, and you haven't seen any of the other Broly movies, give it a chance. The only Broly movie that's not very good, I would say, is Bio Broly, because that's kind of meh, but the other two are really good. Let's move on. Number 3, A Hero's Legacy. This one's going to be controversial with Dragon Ball purists for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, it's Dragon Ball GT. Reason number 2, it's a TV special, not a movie. But as I did say at the beginning of this, they're referred to as movies in the US, so as far as I'm concerned, the TV specials are eligible. I know a lot of people won't like it because they weren't theatrical movies, but that's just the way I rank them because that's the way I like to. So if you don't like it, you don't like it. But Dragon Ball GT, A Hero's Legacy lets us see into the far future to get a glimpse of Goku's great-great-grandson according to Funimation, and his great-great-great-great-grandson according to the original dialogue. Even though this movie takes place slightly before the ending of the final episode of GT, I look at this as the Dragon Ball ending. That scene where Goku Jr. meets Goku at the very end of the film is by far the most memorable ending Dragon Ball has had. Granted, as I mentioned, this takes place before the end of the final episode of GT, so. Another reason I love this movie is the tone is very similar to the original Dragon Ball. Everything's on a smaller scale, and it's just a simple journey for the Dragon Balls. Which to me makes it that much better than just fight after fight after fight like Dragon Ball Z decided to do. And that's one of the reasons I love GT in general, is it doesn't focus completely on that aspect. Anyway, that's why Dragon Ball GT, A Hero's Legacy is my number 3 favorite Dragon Ball movie. If you haven't seen it because you, for whatever reason, don't like GT, you think that it's bad because Toriyama himself didn't write it or whatever, I definitely recommend you still give it a chance. Anyway, I suppose that's time to move on. Number 2, The History of Trunks. Once again, if you're a purist on what qualifies as a movie, this might somewhat agitate you because, again, it is a TV special. But again, as I've stated twice now, I believe, my criteria does include the TV specials to be eligible for movies. History of Trunks is by far one of the saddest moments in Dragon Ball. I won't spoil exactly why, but it is very sad. If you've seen it, you know what I mean. This movie shows us the backstory of future Trunks, albeit through a slightly different lens than we see in the anime and the flashbacks and stuff, and also slightly different than the manga. This is still a very good version, and they're all similar enough to be considered the same thing, I feel. Although, like I said, there are slight differences. History of Trunks is a much more dark and emotional movie in the Dragon Ball series, and that's what makes it so great. Because as you know, if you've seen the Trunks arc, death actually means something in this timeline, because the Dragon Balls are no longer there. So if anything happens to a character, you feel for them. Not to mention this is part of the Androids arc, which I've probably mentioned this before, but the Androids arc is my favorite arc in all of Dragon Ball. That includes all of the Androids arc, starting from 19 and 20, all the way up to Cell. But I digress. Probably the most emotional moment in Dragon Ball Z, at least I would say, is when Trunks goes Super Saiyan towards the end of this movie for the first time. Or rather, is able to maintain it towards the end of the movie for the first time. Like I said, with this one, I'm trying to avoid spoilers, even though you kind of know if you've seen the Trunks arc, but regardless, it's still worth checking out. And that's why History of Trunks is my number 2 movie. Let's move on. Now, before I do number 1, here is a list of honorable mentions, just a couple of them. Return of Cooler. I was thinking about putting this on the list, but as I had to narrow it down to 10, I decided to select only Cooler's Revenge because it was better, and plus I felt that the other things on this list were better than Return of Cooler. Return of Cooler is basically just another Cooler movie, however this time he builds an army of Coolers using something called the Big Getty Star. It's definitely worth checking out, which is why it's an honorable mention. Lord Slug, that's also a good movie. It takes place... The only place it could logically take place in the timeline is after Namek, even though the Super Saiyan form is different, because this movie was actually made before Toriyama unleashed the full, official Super Saiyan design. It's basically a movie about an evil Namekian invading Earth. It's pretty good. I definitely recommend you check it out as well. Also, there's Mystical Adventure, one of the original Dragon Ball movies from the original series, and the only one that I even considered putting on this list. Mystical Adventure takes place in a different universe, and has a tournament, basically, and has Goku fight General Tao, which is that movie's equivalent to Mercenary Tao. But that about does it for the honorable mentions. They would have been on this list had I not included the TV specials, so if you guys wanted if you are a purist, you can consider those numbers 10, 8, or 10, 9, and 8, respectively. But as for me, I count the TV specials, so they're honorable mentions. Number 1, Bardock, the Father of Goku. Yes, my top 3 are all the 3 TV specials. Bardock, the Father of Goku, introduced us to Goku's father, Bardock, as the name implies. It takes place before the events of Dragon Ball, and introduces us to a lot of Saiyan characters, and gives us some more Saiyan backstory. Shows a little bit of Goku's backstory from the beginning, even though we already kind of knew what it was. And even gives a little bit of history to Frieza himself. The reason this movie is my number 1 Dragon Ball movie is because it's darker, it's sad, it's gritty, and it's much more serious than a lot of the others. Not to mention, it doesn't have a moral high ground. Bardock himself isn't a good guy, and he makes no attempt to say that he is. I mean, he's a Saiyan who destroys planets, so that can't make him a good guy. But even then, you feel for him, and you want him to succeed. Obviously, we already know what his inevitable ending was, however, it's still worth watching. Bardock is a very good character, and unfortunately, he's only really been great in one thing. Because later on we got things like Episode of Bardock, which was an OVA that wasn't very good, and had him, like, go back in time and turn Super Saiyan and shit. Then there was Dragon Ball Minus, which Toriyama just fucked up majorly because he retconned a lot of his own original backstory to Goku, and made it even more of a ripoff of Superman than it already was. But the first Bardock special, Bardock, the Father of Goku, is by far my favorite Dragon Ball-related movie. So that does it for my top 10 Dragon Ball movies. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I know my opinions are a little bit different than the majority of the fans, but those are my top 10. If you have a different top 10, I'd love to hear it in the comments. If you have any ideas or suggestions for future videos, of course I'm always open, and let me know what you think of my picks. Do you guys disagree with them? Do you think I made good picks? Are you pissed off that the TV specials are my top 3, or are you okay with it? Let me know in the comments below, and you have a great day.